What would you do if the person you loved most turned out to be your biggest nightmare? In today's story, we dive vital to the absolute limit.
My sister pretended to have a deadly sickness just to get everyone to focus on her, when what she truly needed was real help. No one believed her at first. My sister, Clara, was always the most dramatic person in our family. From the time we were kids, she had to be the center of every talk and every event. If someone else got attention, she found a way to make it about her. Birthday parties for others became about her new clothes. Holiday dinners became about her troubles at work. Family get-togethers turned into stages for whatever act she had planned that week. I learned early to just step back and let her have the spotlight, because fighting it was too tiring. As adults, we lived in different cities and only saw each other a few times a year. I thought the distance might help our relationship. It did not. Clara still called all the time with emergencies that needed my immediate attention. Her car broke down and she needed money. Her boyfriend left and she needed someone to listen for 3 hours. Her landlord was unfair and she needed advice. Every talk was about her and what she needed from me. I played the part of the supportive sister because that's what family does. Then she announced she was sick. It began with unclear complaints about feeling tired all the time. Then she mentioned headaches that would not go away. And she said her doctor was running tests because something was wrong with her blood. Within 2 months, Clara told our whole family she had a rare and very serious sickness that could kill her. She did not name the specific disease at first. She said the doctors were still trying to figure it out exactly, but the outlook was not good. She cried on the phone with our parents. She sent long emotional texts to aunts and uncles about how scared she was. She asked everyone for support during the hardest time of her life. Our family completely gathered around her. Our parents flew out to stay with her for 3 weeks. Our brother took time off work to help with appointments. Relatives sent money to help with medical bills. Friends set up meal deliveries and cleaning services. People started online fundraisers without her even asking because they wanted to help. Clara got thousands of dollars and countless hours of support from people who loved her and believed she was dying. I wanted to help too. I offered to fly out and stay with her. She said she appreciated the thought, but what would really help was money for treatments her insurance would not cover. I sent her $2,000 without thinking twice. She thanked me and said I was the best sister anyone could ask for. This went on for almost a year. Clara updated everyone regularly about her condition. Some weeks were better than others. According to her, she had good days where she felt almost normal and bad days where she could not get out of bed. She described treatments and medications and side effects. She talked about doctors and specialists and second opinions. She knew all the right words to make everything sound real. I started getting suspicious around the 8th month. Something about her stories did not add up. She mentioned a medicine that I looked up and found was used for a completely different condition. She described a treatment that did not exist for the sickness she said she had. She talked about a specialist whose name I could not find in any medical directory. I asked questions that should have been easy to answer. She got defensive and said I did not believe her. She said the stress of my doubt was making her sicker. She told our parents I was being cruel during her most weak time. They called me and asked why I was making things harder for my dying sister. I felt guilty for doubting her. I said sorry and stopped asking questions, and then I ran into her college roommate at a conference in the city where Clara lived. This woman had been close with my sister for years, and I thought she was helping with caretaking. When I asked how Clara was doing, the roommate looked confused. She said she saw Clara just last week at a concert, and she seemed totally fine. She said they went hiking together the month before. She said Clara never mentioned being sick at all. I did not say anything to the roommate. I just held on to that information and started paying closer attention. Over the next 2 months, I put together the truth. Clara was not sick. She had never been sick. There was no rare sickness and no treatments and no specialists. She made the whole thing up because she wanted attention and money and an excuse for why her life was not going the way she wanted. The sickness explained why she could not keep a job. It explained why she needed financial help. It explained why everyone should feel sorry for her and give her whatever she needed. I told our parents what I found out. They did not believe me at first because they could not imagine their daughter would lie about something so serious. I showed them the inconsistencies I found. I printed everything out the night before. Screenshots of her friends' social media posts showing Clara at concerts and restaurants during weeks she said she was stuck in bed. Medical research articles explaining what the medications she mentioned actually treat. Lists of the specialists she named with notes showing none of them exist in any hospital database. A timeline of her story with all the places where details changed or contradicted each other. I organized it all into folders with tabs and labels because I needed this to be clear and undeniable. My hands shook while I worked at my kitchen table past midnight, and I kept thinking about how this was going to ruin everything. But the other choice was letting the lie continue, and I could not do that anymore. I drove to my parents' house the next morning with the folders on my passenger seat. They felt heavy, even though they were just paper. Mom opened the door looking worried because I had called asking to talk about something important regarding Clara. Dad was already sitting in the living room with his coffee, and I could tell from his face that he thought I was going to say sorry for doubting my sister. I asked them to sit at the kitchen table instead because I needed space to spread things out. They looked at each other, but followed me. I put the first folder down in front of them and opened it to show the medication list. Mom picked up the paper and her hands started shaking as she read the names. I explained that the drug Clara said was treating her blood disorder is actually used for diabetes. The treatment she described for her tiredness is a therapy that does not exist for any condition she mentioned. The specialist she said was overseeing her care has no medical license in this state or any nearby state. Dad interrupted before I could continue. He said I must be misunderstanding the medical information because Clara would not lie about something this serious. His voice was firm, like he was talking to a child who did not understand adult matters. I walked them through each piece of evidence slowly and carefully. I showed them the search results where I looked up every doctor name she gave us. I explained why the treatment plan she described made no medical sense. I pointed out how she said she was on 3 medicines that would never be given together. Dad kept shaking his head and saying there had to be an explanation. Maybe the doctors used different names for things. Maybe I was looking at old information. Maybe Clara simplified the details when she talked to us because we would not understand the technical terms. I pulled out the next folder with her friends' social media posts. There was a photo of Clara at an outdoor concert smiling with a drink in her hand. Dated during the week she told everyone she was too weak to get out of bed. Another picture showed her on a hiking trail with a group of friends, posted the same month she said she was starting an aggressive treatment that would leave her exhausted. A third image captured her at a restaurant with her friend and 2 other people laughing at something off camera during a time she said she was too sick to eat solid food. Mom started crying when she saw the photos. She said maybe Clara was confused about the dates. Maybe the doctors made mistakes in explaining things to her and she really believed what she was telling us. Maybe she had good days where she felt well enough to go out and we were judging her for trying to live normally despite her sickness. Her voice cracked on the last words and tears ran down her face. I wanted to comfort her, but I could not stop now. I showed them the timeline where Clara's story changed depending on who she was talking to. She told Mom the sickness affected her blood. She told Dad it was related to her immune system. She told our aunt it was a rare nerve condition. She told me it was something the doctors were still trying to identify. Details shifted constantly, but she always managed to sound convincing in the moment. Dad stared at the timeline for a long time without speaking. I could see him trying to find a way to make it all make sense, to find an explanation that did not require accepting that his daughter had lied to him for a year. He finally said that sick people sometimes get confused about their conditions. The stress of sickness can make details fuzzy. We needed to talk to Clara directly instead of making guesses based on incomplete information. The conversation went on for 4 hours. They went through denial, then anger at me for looking into my sister like she was a criminal, then brief moments where I could see the horrible realization dawning on their faces before they pushed it away again. Mom cried through most of it. Dad's voice got harder and more defensive whenever I presented new evidence. They kept finding reasons why everything could be explained away, why their daughter could not possibly have done something this cruel and planned. But by the end, even they could not ignore the weight of everything I had shown them. Dad finally said they would face Clara together as a family. Mom quickly added that we needed to hear her explanation before jumping to conclusions. They both looked 10 years older than they had when I arrived. I left the folders with them and drove home feeling sick. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. Then I called my brother, Leo. I expected him to be as angry as I was when I told him what I discovered. Instead, the line went completely silent. I said his name twice before he responded. His voice was flat and empty when he finally spoke. He told me he took unpaid leave from work to help Clara with appointments. He maxed out a credit card, paying for things she said insurance would not cover. He rearranged his whole life for 3 months because he thought his sister was dying. And now he felt like the biggest fool alive. I could hear him breathing hard on the other end of the line. He said he wanted to drive to her apartment right now and confront her. His voice was shaking with rage. I told him we needed to do this as a family with our parents present, not just show up at her door. He argued that she did not deserve a carefully planned meeting. She deserved to face what she had done immediately. But I convinced him that confronting her alone would let her control the situation and turn everyone against him. He went quiet again before agreeing reluctantly. He said he needed a few days to calm down before he could be in the same room with her without doing something he would regret. My friend Mia came over that night after I texted her asking if she could talk. She found me on my couch with an open bottle of wine, and I told her everything while crying angry tears that I kept wiping away with my sleeve. She listened without interrupting until I finished. Then she asked if I was sure I wanted to blow up my family like this. The question made me angry at first, like she was suggesting I should have kept quiet, but her face was concerned, not judgmental. I told her the family was already blown up. I was just making everyone else see the whole. She nodded and poured us both more wine. We spent the rest of the evening talking through what would happen next, and she reminded me multiple times that telling the truth was not the same as causing the problem. Over the next few days, my parents and I planned the family meeting. We scheduled it for the following Saturday at their house. Mom sent a text to the family group chat saying we needed to have an important discussion and everyone should plan to be there. Clara responded within minutes with 3 heart emojis and a message saying she would not miss family time even though she was having a rough week health-wise. She added a sad face emoji at the end. Reading her text made my stomach turn. The week dragged by with me barely sleeping. I lay awake running through the confrontation in my head, imagining every possible way Clara might react. Would she admit it immediately? Would she have a breakdown? Would she try to turn it around and make herself the victim somehow? As I practiced what I would say and how I would respond to her excuses, Mia checked on me every day with texts and phone calls. She kept reminding me that I was doing the right thing, that exposing the truth was not cruel, even if it felt that way. On Saturday morning, I arrived at my parents' house 2 hours early. I needed time to set up all the evidence again and prepare myself emotionally for what was coming. Mom answered the door with red, swollen eyes. It was clear she had been crying all week. Dad looked like he had aged another 5 years since I last saw him. His shoulders were slumped, and there were new lines around his mouth. We did not talk much while I arranged everything on the dining room table. They both moved around the house like they were walking through fog, going through motions of making coffee and setting out chairs, but not really present. I organized the folders in the order I planned to present them. Screenshots first, then medical evidence, then the timeline of contradictions. My hands were steadier than I expected. I had been shaking all week, but now that the moment was actually here, I felt calm and focused. This needed to happen. Clara had to face what she had done, and our family needed to stop pretending everything was fine. Leo arrived 20 minutes later, and we sat together in the living room without talking much. He looked at the folders on the dining room table, and his jaw tightened. Mom brought him coffee that he did not drink. Dad checked his watch every few minutes. I kept my phone in my hand, tracking Clara's location through the family sharing app we all used. She was 3 blocks away, then 2 blocks, then pulling into the driveway. The doorbell rang even though she had a key. Mom went to answer it, and I heard Clara's voice in the entryway, bright and cheerful, asking how everyone was doing. She walked into the living room, and I had to force myself not to react to how good she looked. Her skin was clear and glowing. Her eyes were bright without any dark circles. She moved with energy, not the exhaustion she described in her texts. She wore jeans and a fitted sweater that showed she had not lost any weight from the treatments she claimed were making her sick. She hugged Mom first, then Dad, then came over to hug me and Leo. I felt her arms around me and smelled her perfume and thought about all the times I had cried for her over the past year. She pulled back and smiled at all of us, asking what was so important that we needed to have a family meeting. Her voice had just the right amount of concern mixed with curiosity. Dad cleared his throat and gestured for everyone to sit down. Clara took the armchair across from the couch where Leo and I sat. Mom perched on the edge of the love seat next to Dad. The folders were spread across the coffee table between us. Dad started by saying they had discovered some things in Clara's medical information that did not make sense, and they needed her to explain them. Clara's whole face changed in an instant. The smile disappeared and her eyebrows drew together in hurt confusion. She asked what kind of things, what inconsistencies, why were they investigating her medical records instead of supporting her through her sickness? Her voice got higher and shakier with each question. I opened the first folder and pulled out the printed screenshots. I laid them on the table one by one while Clara watched. The medicine she had mentioned that was used for a completely different condition. The specialist whose name did not appear in any medical directory. The treatment plan that did not exist for the sickness she claimed to have. The concert photo from her friend's social media posted during a week Clara told us she was too sick to leave her apartment. Clara's eyes moved from paper to paper, and I watched panic start to show in her expression. She interrupted before I finished, her voice getting defensive. She said the medication names were wrong because I did not understand medical words and doctors used different names than patients did. She said the specialist worked at a private practice that was not listed online because they valued patient privacy. She said the concert photo was from before she got really sick, that her friend must have posted it late. Her excuses came fast and overlapped with each other. I kept putting papers on the table, the timeline of her symptoms that did not match any real disease progression, the insurance statements I had requested that showed no major medical expenses, the text messages where she described treatments on days her location data showed her at restaurants and shopping. Leo leaned forward and cut through her explanations. He asked for the name and phone number of even one doctor who was treating her, just one name they could call to verify her story. Clara opened her mouth and closed it. She said she could not remember the exact names right now because she was too upset by our accusations. She said she was seeing so many specialists it was hard to keep track of all of them. Her hands were shaking and she twisted them in her lap. Mom's voice was gentle when she spoke. She asked to see any medical bills or insurance statements, any paperwork at all from the past year. Clara's face crumpled and tears started running down her cheeks. She said she could not believe her own family was treating her like a criminal when she was fighting for her life. She said this stress was literally making her sicker right now, that the questioning was killing her. The crying went on and on. Clara gasped and sobbed, saying we were killing her with our questions. She put her face in her hands and her shoulders shook. 20 minutes passed with her crying and none of us saying anything. Usually, someone would have gone to comfort her by now. Usually, Mom would have been holding her and Dad would have been saying sorry for upsetting her, but we all just sat there and waited. After a while, I noticed something change in Clara's face. Her eyes opened and looked at each of us through her fingers. The tears were still coming, but slower. She was checking to see if the crying was working. When nobody moved to comfort her, her expression shifted. The tears stopped. She wiped her face with her sleeve and sat up straighter. Her voice changed when she spoke again. She said maybe she had exaggerated some symptoms because she was not getting enough support from the family. She said she was actually sick, just not as seriously as she had led everyone to believe. She said she needed help but did not know how else to ask for it. I felt anger rise in my chest. I asked her directly if there was ever any terminal sickness at all. Clara stared at the floor. A full minute went by in silence. Then she whispered that she was depressed and anxious, which were real medical conditions. She said she felt like she was dying inside, even if it was not physical. Leo stood up so fast his coffee cup fell off the arm of the couch. He shouted that depression does not require fake specialists and made up treatments and thousands of dollars in donations from people who could barely afford it. Clara flinched back in her chair. She said she knew she made mistakes, but she was desperate for attention and love. She asked if that was not a cry for help we should be kind about. Dad's voice was cold when he asked about the money. He wanted to know where it all went if there were no medical treatments. Clara admitted she used it for rent and living expenses because she lost her job. She said she was too ashamed to tell everyone she got fired for poor performance. Mom's face went white as she sat there doing math in her head. I watched her lips move slightly while she counted. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. She looked at Clara and asked if she understood what she had done to people. She said relatives who could barely pay their own bills sent money because they thought she was dying. She said Leo went into debt. She said people donated their savings. Her voice shook when she talked. Dad put his hand on her arm, but she kept going. She asked Clara if she realized what that meant. Clara's face crumpled again. The tears came back fast. She said she never meant for things to go so far. She said it started small, and then she could not figure out how to stop without everyone hating her. Her words came out in gasps between sobs. She insisted she was not a bad person. She said she just made terrible choices because she was struggling with her mental health. She kept saying she was sorry over and over. Mom looked away. Dad stared at the floor. Nobody moved to comfort Clara this time. The crying went on, but it felt different now, empty somehow. I waited for her to finish. When she finally looked up at me, I told her she had a whole year to stop. I said she had 12 months to come clean. I pointed out she could have gotten actual help for her real problems instead of making up fake ones. My voice stayed calm, but I felt anger burning in my chest. Clara's expression changed. The sadness disappeared and something harder took its place. She looked at me with real anger in her eyes. She said I had always been judgmental. She said I acted perfect and never understood what it was like to struggle. She said I made everything look easy and never had compassion for people who were not as put together as me. I almost laughed at that. I wanted to list all the times I had helped her over the years, all the money I had sent, all the hours I had listened, all the advice I had given. But I did not say any of that. It would not matter. She would just twist it into another way I had failed her. The room got quiet again. We all sat there exhausted. Dad finally spoke and said they needed time to process everything before deciding what happens next. He said this was too big to figure out in one conversation. Mom nodded. She looked 10 years older than she had that morning. Clara stood up slowly. She grabbed her purse from the floor. She looked both defiant and scared at the same time. Her chin was up, but her hands were shaking. She walked to the door without saying goodbye. None of us tried to stop her. The door closed and we heard her car start in the driveway. I stayed sitting at the table with my parents. Nobody knew what to say. Over the next 3 days, Leo and I talked constantly. He called me twice a day. We texted back and forth late into the night. He wanted to know if we should demand legal action. I kept thinking about whether we should just cut Clara out of our lives completely. Leo said he wanted her charged with fraud. He said what she did was an actual crime. He said people go to jail for this kind of thing. I understood why he felt that way. He had maxed out his credit card. He had taken unpaid leave from work. He had rearranged his whole life for her fake sickness. But part of me could not imagine sending my own sister to jail. I kept going back and forth. Some hours I agreed with Leo completely. Other times I thought maybe there was another way to handle it. We talked through every option. Criminal charges, civil suits, just walking away, making her pay everyone back, telling the extended family, keeping it quiet. Nothing felt right. Every choice had consequences that made my stomach hurt. Leo's anger did not fade at all. If anything, it got stronger as the days went on. He kept finding new things to be mad about. He remembered specific lies Clara told. He thought about all the people who donated money they could not afford. He calculated how much time and money the family had wasted. I was angry too, but mine felt different, heavier, more complicated. She was still my sister, even though she had done something horrible. Mom called on the third day. Her voice sounded tired. She said she and Dad had made a decision about Clara. She said they thought Clara needed to pay back the money and get professional help, but they did not want to involve the police. She said it would destroy the family if Clara got arrested. She said they needed to handle this privately. I felt my blood pressure rise while she talked. I recognized what was happening. They were already trying to make the consequences smaller, already making excuses, already protecting Clara from facing what she had done. I told Mom that Clara committed actual fraud against dozens of people. I said protecting her from consequences was exactly the enabling behavior that created this whole situation in the first place. My voice got louder. I could not help it. I said they had been doing this her entire life, making excuses, smoothing things over, letting her get away with bad behavior because they did not want family drama. And look where it got us. Mom got defensive immediately. She said I did not understand how complicated this was. She said I was not a parent, so I could not know what it felt like. She said they were trying to do what was best for everyone. I wanted to scream that what was best for everyone was holding Clara responsible, but I just repeated that this was fraud. Real fraud with real victims. Mom said they had already decided. Her voice got firmer. She said this was their choice to make as Clara's parents. I called Leo right after I hung up with Mom. I told him what our parents decided. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said he wanted to do a three-way call with them. I set it up and we all got on the line together. Leo did not waste time. He told our parents that if they did not hold Clara responsible, he was done with the entire family. His voice was cold. He said he would not come to holidays. He would not call. He would not visit. He said he refused to be part of a family that enabled fraud and manipulation. The words hung there. Nobody spoke. Finally, Dad said we were all being too emotional. He said we needed to think rationally about what was best for everyone. Leo laughed. It was not a happy sound. He asked Dad what part of this situation called for rational thinking. He said Clara had lied to everyone for a year. She had taken thousands of dollars under false pretenses. She had made him go into debt. And now our parents wanted to protect her from consequences because it might be uncomfortable for the family. He said that was not rational, it was cowardice. Dad's voice got sharp. He said Leo was out of line. Mom started crying. I sat there holding my phone and feeling the family break apart in real time. Word started spreading despite our attempts to keep things contained. I do not know who talked first. Maybe one of my parents mentioned something to a relative. Maybe Clara told someone her version of events, but somehow people found out. My aunt called me 4 days after the confrontation. Her voice was shaking when she asked if it was true that Clara was never sick. I could hear the betrayal in every word. She said she had sent money every single month for 8 months. She said she had skipped buying new glasses she needed because she wanted to help Clara. She said she had told all her friends about her brave niece fighting a terminal sickness. Now she wanted to know if it was all fake. I did not know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to protect the family privacy, but my aunt deserved the truth. She had been one of Clara's biggest supporters. She had sacrificed for someone who was lying to her face. I confirmed it was true. I told her Clara admitted there was no sickness. My aunt made a sound like someone had punched her. She asked how Clara could do something like that. I said I did not know. She said she needed to go. The line went dead. My aunt called other relatives immediately. I know because they started calling me. Within 2 days, the entire extended family knew everything. The reactions split into different groups. Some people were furious at Clara. My uncle sent emails demanding his money back. Cousins posted vague things on social media about fake people and betrayal, but other relatives got angry at me for exposing her. They said I should have handled it privately. They said I was destroying the family by spreading this around. They acted like I was the problem instead of Clara. A few people tried to stay neutral. They suggested family therapy. They said everyone was hurt and we needed professional help to work through it. They sent me articles about family conflict resolution. They meant well, but it felt like they were missing the point. This was not a conflict. This was fraud. Some relatives stopped talking to me completely. They did not return my calls. They unfriended me on social media. I watched the family divide into sides like we were going through a divorce. People who had known me my whole life suddenly treated me like I had done something wrong. All because I told the truth about what Clara did. My uncle's email arrived 3 days after the family found out. I opened it and read the first line demanding that Clara return the $3,000 he sent during her fake sickness. His words got sharper as the email went on. He said he had already contacted a lawyer about small claims court. He said he had given her 2 weeks to respond with the payment plan or he would file the paperwork. He copied the entire family on the email. Within hours, other relatives started sending similar messages. My aunt wanted her money back. 2 cousins demanded repayment. A second uncle said he felt betrayed and wanted every dollar returned immediately. The emails kept coming all afternoon. Then Clara sent a mass text to everyone. She said she could not believe her own family was attacking her when she was already suffering. She said the harassment was making her want to hurt herself. She said if anything happened to her, it would be because we pushed her too far. My phone started ringing 5 minutes after that text went out. Mom was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. She said we had gone too far, and Clara was talking about ending her own life. She said if something happened, it would be our fault for exposing her instead of handling it privately. Dad got on the phone and told me I needed to call off the relatives. He said I started this by telling everyone the truth, so now I had to fix it before Clara did something terrible. I felt my hands shaking as I held the phone. Clara was using the exact same tricks that worked for years. She was playing the victim and making everyone feel guilty for holding her responsible. I told Mom that Clara threatening to harm herself was manipulation, not genuine crisis. Mom started yelling that I did not understand how serious this was. She said Clara sent her a text saying she had pills in her hand right now. I asked if they had called for a wellness check or contacted emergency services. Dad said they did not want to upset Clara by sending police to her apartment. I hung up and sat on my couch trying to breathe normally. Mia came over within 20 minutes of my text. She sat next to me while I explained what was happening. She asked what I wanted to do. I said I refused to back down just because Clara was threatening herself. Mia pulled out her phone and started searching for family therapists who specialized in manipulation and trauma. She found one named Dr. Martin, who had good reviews and experience with family conflict. I called his office the next morning and explained the situation to his assistant. She said Dr. Martin could meet with me for a consultation that afternoon. I drove to his office and spent an hour telling him everything about Clara's fake sickness and the family fallout. Dr. Martin listened without interrupting. He asked specific questions about family dynamics and Clara's patterns of behavior. He said he could facilitate a mediated conversation if everyone agreed to participate. He said the goal would be working toward responsibility rather than just venting anger. I asked how much it would cost. He quoted a rate that made me pause, but I agreed anyway. Dr. Martin said he would need everyone to commit to ground rules about respectful communication. I told him that would be hard because I wanted Clara to face real consequences, not just talk about feelings. He said responsibility could only happen if people felt safe enough to be honest. I left his office feeling slightly hopeful, but mostly exhausted. I called Mom that night and told her about Dr. Martin. She said therapy sounded good, but she was not sure Clara would agree to go. I said that was fine, but I would not have any contact with Clara until she participated in at least one session. Dad called me the next day and said they would talk to Clara about therapy. She refused immediately. She said a therapist would just gang up on her like everyone else was doing. She said she did not need therapy because she was not the one attacking family members. Mom tried reasoning with her, but Clara would not budge. I told Dad that was Clara's choice, but mine was to maintain my boundary. Leo called and said he was doing the same thing. He told our parents they could have a relationship with Clara if they wanted, but he would not be around her until she took real steps toward making things right. Mom called me crying again 2 days later. She said they told Clara they would not have contact with her until she agreed to one therapy session. Clara apparently screamed at them for abandoning her, but the next morning, she texted saying she would go to one session just to prove everyone wrong about her. Dr. Martin scheduled the session for the following week. I drove to his office feeling sick to my stomach. Mom and Dad arrived first, both looking like they had not slept. Leo showed up right before the appointment started. Clara walked in last, her face set in an expression of wounded dignity. Dr. Martin welcomed everyone and gestured to chairs arranged in a circle. He started by establishing ground rules about speaking respectfully and not interrupting. He said the focus would be on moving forward rather than attacking each other. I felt frustration building immediately because I wanted Clara to face exactly what she did. Dr. Martin asked Clara to explain in her own words what happened and why. She took a deep breath and launched into a story about struggling with depression for years. She said she made poor decisions because her mental health was so bad. She described feeling desperate for connection and support, but not knowing how to ask for it properly. She said the fake sickness started as a small exaggeration that spiraled out of control. She cried while talking about how ashamed she felt now. She said she never intended to hurt anyone, and she understood why people were angry. The whole speech sounded carefully crafted to make her look like a victim of her own mental illness rather than someone who deliberately manipulated people. Dr. Martin thanked her for sharing and turned to me. I looked at Clara and started listing everything she actually did. I talked about how she researched medical terminology to make her lies sound convincing. I described the consistent pattern of deception over months, not just one mistake. I explained how she manipulated people's genuine love and fear to get money and attention. I said this was not poor judgment from depression. It was calculated fraud. Dr. Martin asked Clara how she responded to hearing my perspective. Clara wiped her eyes and said she understood why I saw it that way. She admitted the deception was more extensive than she initially acknowledged, but she insisted her mental state at the time made it hard for her to think clearly. She said depression and anxiety impaired her judgment about right and wrong. Dr. Martin asked what she was doing now to address her actual mental health issues. Clara said she was looking into therapists but had not found the right fit yet. She mentioned she had researched some options online. Leo leaned forward in his chair and asked if she felt remorse for the specific harm she caused. He listed his credit card debt from helping her. He mentioned our parents' stress and wasted time. He brought up relatives who sacrificed their own needs to support her fake sickness. He asked if she actually felt sorry for those concrete consequences. Clara said of course she felt terrible about everything, but her tone sounded defensive rather than genuinely apologetic. She said she was doing her best to cope with the guilt while also dealing with everyone's anger. Dr. Martin guided the conversation toward discussing concrete steps for responsibility and repair. I proposed that Clara create a written list of everyone she owed money to. I said she needed a realistic repayment plan with specific amounts and dates. I added that she should attend regular therapy with proof of attendance that she could share with the family. Mom nodded slowly and said those seemed like reasonable requests. Clara looked at the papers in front of her and shook her head. She said paying everyone back was impossible because she could barely cover her rent and groceries each month. I felt my jaw tighten as I listened to her make excuses about her tight budget. I pointed out that being broke now did not erase the fact that she stole thousands of dollars from people who trusted her. She should not have taken the money if she could not afford to pay it back, and her current financial problems did not make what she did any less wrong. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she insisted I did not understand how hard things were for her. Dr. Martin asked her to explain what repayment would realistically look like given her situation. She stammered through vague promises about trying her best when she could. Dad cleared his throat and surprised me by saying that trying was not good enough. He told Clara she needed to make actual repayment efforts even if it took years to finish. Mom nodded in agreement, which shocked me even more. Dad said they would help her create a budget and a real payment schedule with specific amounts and dates, but she had to follow through completely or they would cut off all financial support from them. No more emergency money, no more help with bills, nothing until she proved she was serious about making things right. Clara looked stunned that our parents were taking my side. She started to protest, but Dad held up his hand. He said this was not negotiable, and she had already gotten more chances than most people would give her. Dr. Martin guided us toward wrapping up the session with clear next steps. I repeated my earlier proposal about individual therapy, a written repayment plan, and personal apology letters to everyone she deceived. Clara agreed reluctantly to all three conditions. Dr. Martin pulled out his calendar and scheduled a follow-up session for 1 month later to check on her progress. He said the next meeting would focus on reviewing what she had accomplished and deciding whether family therapy should continue. We left the office in uncomfortable silence. I felt cautiously hopeful that maybe Clara would actually follow through this time, with our parents backing me up. 2 weeks passed, and I started hearing from relatives about the apologies Clara sent. My aunt called first to ask if I knew Clara was sending text messages instead of actual letters. I felt my stomach sink as my aunt read the message out loud. Clara wrote that she was sorry everyone was so upset and that she had been going through a really hard time. The whole thing focused on her suffering and barely mentioned the harm she caused. My uncle got a similar text that said she understood why people were mad but hoped they could forgive her someday. Leo called me furious after receiving his apology. He said Clara spent 2 sentences saying sorry and then 3 paragraphs explaining how depressed she had been. There was nothing about the credit card debt he went into or the unpaid leave he took from work. I contacted my parents to tell them Clara was not following through properly. Mom made excuses about how hard it must be for Clara to write real apology letters. I reminded her that doing hard things was the entire point of being responsible. The repayment plan arrived in my email exactly 2 weeks after the therapy session. I opened the attachment and stared at the numbers in disbelief. Clara proposed paying $50 per month to family members starting with our parents, then me and Leo, then extended relatives. I did the math quickly in my head. Just paying back our parents, Leo, and me would take over 8 years at that rate. Adding in aunts, uncles, and cousins would push it past 15 years. The plan made no mention of the online donors or friends who contributed. I forwarded the email to Leo with the subject line, "You have got to be kidding me." He called within 5 minutes, his voice tight with anger. He said he just looked at Clara's social media and she posted photos from a shopping trip 2 days ago with bags from expensive stores. Another post showed her at a nice restaurant with friends talking about treating herself after a stressful week. Leo said the repayment plan was insulting and he was rejecting it completely. I agreed and added that we needed to consider other options. I told my parents I wanted to consult with a lawyer about whether Clara's actions qualified as criminal fraud. Mom immediately started crying and begging me not to pursue legal action. She said involving lawyers and courts would permanently destroy any chance of healing as a family. Dad backed her up, arguing that we needed to handle this privately within the family. I felt torn between wanting justice and not wanting to send my sister to jail. But I also knew that letting Clara face no real consequences would just teach her that she could get away with anything. I made an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. The consultation cost $200, but I needed professional advice about our options. The lawyer listened to everything and took notes while I explained the fake sickness, the money Clara received, and her refusal to pay it back properly. She said we definitely had grounds for fraud charges based on the deliberate deception and financial losses. But she warned that prosecution was unlikely unless the amounts were significantly larger or we had many victims willing to testify publicly. She explained that fraud cases were hard to prove, and district attorneys often did not pursue them unless the evidence was overwhelming. The lawyer suggested focusing on civil recovery through small claims court instead of criminal charges. She also recommended establishing clear family boundaries and cutting off contact if Clara continued refusing to be responsible. I left her office feeling defeated. The legal system could not really help us, and family pressure was already building against taking any action at all. The 1-month follow-up session with Dr. Martin arrived faster than I expected. We all gathered in his office again with the same tense energy as before. Dr. Martin started by asking Clara about her progress in individual therapy. She shifted in her seat and admitted she only went to 2 sessions. She said the therapist was not a good fit for her, and she had not found a new one yet. I felt my hope draining away as I listened to her make the same kinds of excuses she always made. Dr. Martin asked why she stopped looking for a new therapist if the first one did not work out. Clara said she had been really busy with work and it was hard to find time for appointments. I wanted to scream that she had found plenty of time to go shopping and out to dinner based on her social media posts. Dr. Martin asked about the repayment plan and whether she had started making any payments. Clara said she sent the plan like we agreed, but nobody seemed happy with it. She made it sound like we were being unreasonable rather than her offering an insulting amount. Dr. Martin looked at me, and I explained that $50 per month would take over a decade to repay just the immediate family. I mentioned that Clara was posting about buying new clothes and eating at restaurants while claiming she could not afford more than $50 monthly. Clara got defensive and said I was spying on her social media and twisting everything. She insisted those were old photos she just posted recently. Dr. Martin held up his hand to stop the argument. He said the pattern he was seeing showed avoidance of real responsibility. He asked Clara directly what consequences would actually motivate her to take responsibility seriously. Clara stared at the floor and did not answer. The silence stretched out uncomfortably until Leo finally spoke up. He said he was done trying and would not have any contact with Clara until she made genuine effort to repair the harm she caused. He looked at our parents and told them they could have relationships with both of their children, but he would not attend any family events where Clara was present. Mom started crying again, but Leo did not back down. He said he meant it completely, and this was his final boundary. I turned to Clara and spoke the words I had been holding back for weeks. I told her I loved her, but could not have a relationship with someone who refused to see the harm they caused. She stared at me like I had slapped her across the face. Her eyes filled with tears, and she said we were abandoning her when she needed family support most. She said this proved we never really cared about her at all. She said if we actually loved her, we would help her through this hard time instead of punishing her. I felt the familiar pull to comfort her and take back my words, but I stayed quiet and let her accusations hang in the air between us. She grabbed her purse and walked out of Dr. Martin's office without looking back. The door clicked shut behind her, and the three of us sat in heavy silence. Mom called me 2 days later, crying so hard I could barely understand her words. She said the family was falling apart, and she did not know how to fix it. Dad got on the phone and asked if I could just try one more time to work things out with Clara. I explained that I would have a relationship with them separately, but I would not pretend everything was fine. I told them I loved them both, but enabling Clara's manipulation was not helping anyone. Mom said I was being too harsh, and Clara was still my sister no matter what she did. I reminded them that being family did not mean accepting abuse and fraud without consequences. Dad argued that families work through problems together instead of cutting each other off. I said working through problems required both people to acknowledge the problem existed. The call ended with Mom crying again and Dad saying they needed time to think about everything. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Klein the following week. Mia had been amazing support, but I needed professional help processing the mess my family had become. I told Dr. Klein about Clara's fraud and the confrontation and my decision to step back. She asked how I felt about losing my relationship with my sister. I realized I was grieving something I never actually had. I had spent years hoping Clara would change into the sister I wanted her to be. Dr. Klein helped me see that accepting reality did not mean I was giving up on Clara. It meant I was giving up on the fantasy version of her I had been clinging to. Over the next month, I cried through multiple sessions about the sister relationship I had wished for, while learning to accept who Clara really was. Mia came over most evenings with takeout and listened to me process my feelings. She never pushed me to make up or told me what to do. She just sat with me through the hard parts and reminded me I was making healthy choices even when they felt terrible. We watched mindless TV shows, and she made me laugh when I needed distraction. Some nights we talked for hours about family dynamics and boundaries. Other nights we just existed in the same space without needing to fill the silence. Having her steady presence kept me grounded when everything else felt chaotic. My phone started buzzing with messages from extended family members. My aunt texted to thank me for exposing the truth. She said she had suspected something was off, but felt too guilty to question someone who was supposedly dying. She apologized for not trusting her instincts earlier. My uncle sent a long email saying he respected my courage in speaking up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. 2 of my cousins reached out saying they were glad someone finally held Clara responsible. But my other aunt stopped responding to my texts entirely. My grandmother left a voicemail saying I should be ashamed of myself for tearing the family apart. 3 relatives unfollowed me on social media. I heard through Mom that several family members were calling me dramatic and saying I was making the situation worse than it needed to be. The family split into clear groups with some people supporting truth and responsibility, while others blamed me for destroying family unity. Mom called 6 weeks after the confrontation to tell me Clara had sent money to a few relatives. She said Clara gave our aunt $20 and sent $50 to our uncle. Mom's voice had this hopeful tone, like these tiny payments proved Clara was changing. I asked if $50 made up for the $3,000 our uncle had donated. Mom said it was a start, and we should encourage progress instead of criticizing every step. I pointed out that Clara was posting photos of new clothes and restaurant meals on social media while claiming she could only afford minimal payments. Mom got defensive and said maybe those were old photos or gifts from friends. I told her I was not going to celebrate the bare minimum when Clara was clearly choosing to spend money on herself instead of making real repayment. Mom said I was being unforgiving and Clara was trying her best. We ended the call agreeing to disagree. 3 months after the initial confrontation, Dad called with news about Clara. He said she had lost another job and was asking family members for money again. This time, she was not claiming sickness as the reason. She told everyone she was struggling financially and needed help with rent. Dad said several relatives had refused to give her anything. My aunt told Clara she needed to pay back what she already owed before asking for more. My uncle said he would not send another dollar until he saw consistent repayment. Dad sounded worried about Clara's financial situation. I felt zero sympathy. She had brought this on herself through her own choices, and now she was facing the natural consequences of burning every bridge she had. Mom texted me a week later asking if I would consider making up with Clara now that she was struggling. She said Clara could really use family support during this difficult time. I called Mom back and explained the difference between struggling and taking responsibility. I said Clara struggling financially was not the same as Clara acknowledging what she did and making genuine efforts to repair the harm. I told Mom that helping Clara avoid consequences would not teach her anything, except that manipulation still worked. Mom argued that family helps each other no matter what. I said real help meant letting people face the results of their actions so they could learn and grow. Mom said I sounded cold and heartless. I said I sounded like someone who finally understood that love sometimes meant stepping back instead of enabling. I started having regular phone calls with my parents where I set clear rules about our conversations. I told them I wanted to keep a relationship with them, but I would not discuss Clara's drama or be pressured to make up. The first few calls felt awkward with obvious gaps where they wanted to mention Clara, but stopped themselves. Dad would start a sentence about family plans and then trail off when he remembered I would not attend anything with Clara present. Mom would mention something funny that happened and then catch herself before saying Clara's name. But gradually the conversations got easier. We talked about their garden and my work and movies we had watched. We shared recipes and funny stories about neighbors. We found ways to connect that did not revolve around Clara's chaos. It was not the family dynamic I had grown up with, but it was healthier than what we had before. Leo called me every Sunday evening and we talked for at least an hour. We compared notes about our parents and supported each other's boundaries. He told me about his therapy sessions and how he was working through his anger at Clara. His therapist was helping him, except that he could not control Clara's choices or force her to change. Leo said he was learning to let go of expecting her to become someone different. We talked about our childhood and how we had both learned to handle Clara's drama in different ways. He admitted he had always made excuses for her because he felt protective as her older brother. I shared how I had always stepped aside to avoid conflict. We realized we had both enabled her behavior in our own ways. Our weekly calls became a safe space to process family dynamics without judgment. We grew closer than we had been in years through our shared experience of setting boundaries and refusing to participate in Clara's manipulation anymore. 6 months after the confrontation, Dad called with unexpected news. My uncle had taken Clara to small claims court and won a judgment for the money she owed him. The judge ordered Clara to pay back the $3,000 in monthly payments. Dad said Clara was furious about being sued by family. I said our uncle had every right to pursue legal action after Clara refused to pay him back on her own. Dad mentioned that Clara was making the court-ordered payments, but they were minimal amounts. I asked how much she was paying, and Dad said $75 per month. I calculated that it would take over 3 years to repay just our uncle at that rate. Dad said other relatives were now considering the same legal approach. My aunt had already filed paperwork for small claims court. 2 cousins were discussing whether to pursue legal action for the money they donated. Dad sounded defeated as he described the family breaking apart further with lawsuits and legal threats. I told him this was what responsibility looked like when someone refused to take it willingly. He said he wished there was another way. I said there had been another way, but Clara chose not to take it. I found a support group for families dealing with manipulation through an online search. The meetings happened Tuesday evenings in a community center basement with folding chairs arranged in a circle and bad coffee in paper cups. I walked in nervous the first time because I had never done anything like this before. The leader introduced herself and explained the group's purpose while I sat there wondering if I had made a mistake coming. Then people started sharing their stories, and I realized every single person in that room understood exactly what I was going through. A woman talked about her sister who faked cancer for 3 years. A man described his brother, who invented elaborate lies to get money from relatives. Another woman shared how her daughter manipulated the entire family with false emergencies. I listened to story after story that sounded like versions of what Clara had done to us. When it was my turn to speak, I told them everything. Nobody looked shocked or judgmental. They just nodded like they had heard it all before. The leader explained patterns of self-centered behavior and how some people use deception as a tool for getting needs met. She said understanding the psychology does not excuse the actions, but helps us stop taking it personally. That idea hit me hard because I had spent months feeling like Clara's deception was somehow about me. I kept going back every Tuesday and learned more each week about manipulation tactics and boundary setting and the difference between helping someone and enabling them. The group gave me words for what I had experienced and confirmation that my response was reasonable. My relationship with mom and dad shifted slowly over the next few months. They called more often, and the conversations felt different. Dad admitted one Sunday that they had always made excuses for Clara because she seemed more fragile than Leo and me. He said they worried about her more and tried to protect her from consequences because they thought she could not handle them. I told him that protection created the exact dynamic that led to the fraud. Mom added that they recognized now how their enabling taught Clara she could avoid responsibility by playing victim. These conversations were not easy and sometimes ended with long silences or tears. But they were talking honestly about their role instead of defending Clara or blaming me for exposing her. Dad said he wished they had set better boundaries when we were kids instead of always smoothing things over. Mom mentioned how they had stepped in whenever Clara faced natural consequences at school or work. They saw now how every rescue taught her the wrong lesson. I appreciated their honesty, even though part of me was still angry about the years of enabling. We talked about moving forward differently and what healthy family relationships could look like. These were not dramatic breakthrough moments, but small acknowledgments that added up over time. My birthday arrived in April, and I woke up to messages from friends and a call from my parents. I checked my email mid-morning and found a long message from Clara. The subject line said she missed me. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. She wrote 3 paragraphs about how much she thought about me and wished we could start over with a clean slate. She said she understood I was hurt, but holding on to anger was not healthy for either of us. She suggested we put the past behind us and rebuild our relationship because life was too short for family fights. The email had that familiar tone where she admitted wrongdoing vaguely while making it sound like the real problem was everyone else's reaction. I sat with the email for 2 days before responding. I wrote back briefly that I was open to rebuilding trust if she showed lasting responsibility through actions instead of just words. I said I needed to see genuine change over time before I could consider a relationship. I did not explain further. I just sent those 2 sentences and then closed my email. Clara did not respond, and I did not expect her to. The email felt like another manipulation attempt rather than real reaching out. A year passed since I first discovered the truth about Clara's fake sickness. I sat at my kitchen table one morning drinking coffee and realized I felt at peace with the family situation, even though it was not fixed the way I once hoped. I had regular phone calls with mom and dad where we talked about real things without the constant drama. Leo and I were closer than ever through our weekly conversations. Some extended family members still did not speak to me because they thought I had been too harsh on Clara. Others had reached out to thank me for telling the truth. The family was broken in ways that might never fully heal. But I had healthy relationships with the people who mattered most and clear boundaries with Clara. I had accepted that some family members would never understand my choices, and that was okay. I did not need everyone to agree with me. I just needed to live according to my own values instead of sacrificing honesty to keep peace. I heard through Mom that Clara was working steadily at a new job in retail management. Mom said she had been there for 4 months without getting fired or quitting. She also mentioned Clara was attending therapy more regularly with a new therapist she seemed to connect with better. I did not know if any of this represented real change or just better image management. Clara had always been good at acting responsible when people were watching, but I felt cautiously hopeful hearing she was keeping a job and going to therapy. I was not invested in her transformation as a requirement for my own happiness anymore. Whether she changed or not did not determine my peace. I had built a life that did not revolve around managing her chaos or waiting for her to become someone different. My life felt fuller now with deeper friendships and stronger boundaries. I had learned to speak truth even when it made people uncomfortable. Mia and I were closer than ever because I had let her see the messy parts of my family instead of pretending everything was fine. I had made new friends through the support group who understood family struggles without judgment. I felt confident in my ability to set limits and walk away from relationships that required me to compromise my values. The experience with Clara taught me that protecting family harmony at the expense of honesty helps nobody. Real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices so they have a chance to actually grow. I could not control whether Clara learned from what happened or continued the same patterns. I could only control my own choices and boundaries. That clarity brought more peace than any family reunion could have given me.